those questions, not all, but a lot of them are most about the history of that individual. When we talked about biology early on in the semester, I gave you these diagrams to think about in terms of the growth of the brain, of the networks of the brain, of how neurons are connected to each other, and what we know for sure, actually, that when we get what we know for sure is that wow, grow neurons. What you can't is like take out some of their neurons for how your brain connects itself at a later point in time. Because of these critical experiences that we talk about. Before we do, figure uh,
Saw my family. I got to see my uncle's baby shower. So yeah, yeah, it's gonna be nice.
quotes and I feel kind of praise what the they go up to live what use a phrase that he goes through out of the development. There's something like speaking in the language the kid understands. Example, speaking the language the kid understands. I just had it. Uh, he cried. I'm like, okay, not a dramatic, not a, something went up and he cried. He went, he's hungry, because he's tired, because when he's not very diaper, he cried. That's what he does. That's his language of letting you know something going. On my arm right here, I these like three little dots. If you can see them. But they're itchy, and they were a bunch of red. Yesterday, the day before. It's poison oak. You know what poison oak is? Poison ivy is was very oil. And I want to hold my son. For those of you who can't always, if at a point where he has its poison oil on his skin, he notices it. If you set it right, what will it do? It's going to cry. How do I know whether or not he's got that I can't see? Or that he's a diaper, or that he's so I want to help you. Hey, I want to. They have a very good way to understand that. How do we get from sort of basic, very like sensory, like, the, that development is not like a straight short trajectory, and it's not a guaranteed one. I'll tell you one more story before we get rolling. This is the story of Lucy, code name Lucy. Um, Lucy has sense, but to this is difficult. There's a look at what she can't do either of those sounds without their life is not one who would recognize or who would that development is not straightforward and it requires very specific skill. Only because he has to figure out that he was so that's true. What we know is that Lucy is incapable of defining language because she was deprived of sensory and social activity. I certainly would in the outside world other ages were not or capable of what we've got. Yeah, you didn't teach me or language or now it's hard for me to learn credits and find is good. You could do it. Getting older experts being able to perform several at a high level, like writing some sort of fresh so that you can get paid for work. There is a flexibility and adaptability on one hand, and efficiency is that with charts. So let's talk about how the books mechanisms for cognitive reasoning really combine. We're going to talk about how the early development of consciousness specifically to expectation. I think there's a whoop, there it is. I think I'm about to get clean. This feels much better. And finally, how early reasoning changes over the course of childhood, and specifically specifically through the use of language modeling others, specifically like what somebody else is thinking. I'm like modeling, like we saw with the Bobo doll in the learning experience. Why would somebody be beating the Bobo doll? Let me model what they must have been doing. I'll beat the Bobo doll too in order to discover what they had in mind. So to start with the basic mechanisms, one, we develop very quickly. It is incredibly dramatic, the amount of change that happens over the first 2 years of life. So much so that one of the most famous sort of psychologists for thinking about development had like 4 stages of development, but the first one was broken down into another 5 stages because there's just so much going on. None of the other 3 were broken down in such a way. But just consider the difference between this kid and that one. This kid is trying to figure out how to not fall over. A year and a half later, they're figuring out how to build the strongest tower and the most stable one that won't fall over. They've externalized their concepts of balance and stability and strength from their own body and their own experience of their own body to the manipulation of other bodies. That's not a small thing. You realize you learn when you do something like, wow, that person's really upset. They must be angry at that person you're yelling at. You're not doing that because that's obvious. You're doing that because you've built up a long lifetime of experiences where when you yell at other people, you're then externalizing that model to others. Or you've seen other people say, I'm really upset. Even before birth, there's an incredible amount of development. Look at all the details in this image, but I do want you to get a sense that what starts out as like a fuzzy little cord here develops into what more or less looks like an adult brain by the time we're born. Of course, that brain is full of is again not linear process. Some parts grow at faster rates than others. We've actually found that what differentiates human brains from other brains more than anything else is not their size, it's not their density, it's not the number of neurons or connections or experiences. What distinguishes them most reliably from the animal kingdom that we find is that it grows at different speeds, different parts of it, in comparison to other. This part goes really fast. This one very slow. And this one goes while the rest is dead. It's not straightforward. Here's another idea. So again, here's 9 months. Consider the amount of change that happened in comparison from here to here. Obvious density differences, folding differences, but not nearly as dramatic as what happens in the first 9 months, or even what happens between being born and about 5 years old. This is what the newborn looks like. Essentially, this is what my face looks like to him right now. Is this sort of just like fuzzy, blurry thing? It'll be 8 weeks before he can really differentiate my eyes, one side and the other. It'll be 3 months before he knows what color those eyes are, and it'll be 6 months before he can see my nose and my cheek. Some fascinating stuff about consciousness. 1 month old, when we're looking at eye gaze here, they sort of jump around, mainly focusing on the borders of the face. So every time you see like a corner and another line drawn, that's what we call a saccade when it moves. And when it deepens and stays in the same place, we call it a fixation. So they fixate here at 1 month old at the borders and edges of the face. My son isn't even there yet. He's just sort of like wildly looking around the room. But by the time they're 2 months old, literally just 1 month later, all of a sudden those fixations, look how much black there is here in comparison to here. Those fixations almost disappear. A quick check-in, and then it's all about the eyes and the mouth. It goes between the eyes and the mouth. But broadly collected as a culture, specifically in East Asia, mainly the eyes. Mainly the eyes. Incredibly. Um, this is fun because, sound is not working. Give me a second. Sorry to whatever happens next.
He's going. John needs to live. Let me show you these rays on a certain wire. Now, here are 106's two buttons. As you can see, it was here's maybe 106. He's going to the wire button. John needs to live. Oh, he's going back. He's back on the clock button. He'll stay on the clock button. Actually, this baby spends 17, 18 hours a day on the clock button. Less than 1 hour a day on the wire. We predict that the variable of contact factor will be a variable measurable factor, but we are unprepared to find that it completely overwhelms and overshadows all other variables, including those of nursing. Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth after a creature comfort like a baby with a blanket. But is this really love? Well, what do you mean by saying that people love is love? Certainly, one thing they make is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, what the problem was, didn't mean that. That you frightened the baby, then he went running to his mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security. That baby loved his mother. Now, in this experiment, this is
Okay, so first of all, I guess a disclaimer. This is a real video from the 50s. That is how they talk. It's on robot feet and it's not AI generated. Um, this was a really crazy, eye-opening experiment. If you think back to the 50s, they sort of assumed in this behaviorist tradition that what mattered was food. That's what keeps us going. We need food in order to keep living. You know, this was in the world that like discipline was how you educate. Right? That like if you want somebody to learn something, beat them into submission until they learn it. If they're being bad, if they're being good, give them presents. It was in a world where society was all about being buttoned up, formal. Yes, sir. Ma'am. Yes, father. It was shocking in so many ways to find out that mammals quite similar to ourselves in a world where it is still hot and crowded, whether or not monkeys and humans shared a common ancestor, or that such an idea was preposterous. That a creature looking quite similar to ourselves in Fort Cove left the food in order to simply be one. But there was this like touch-based sensation that was, in this case, motivating to them, so much so to find security and comfort while they were in a cage and there were loud noises going on. At least it appears. That's where it is. That extent, he was going. The next part of this shows the monkey doing the same thing in response to a big scary monster-looking thing that they created. I can show you the big scary monster-looking thing. So it's it looks like a, but the same thing. The monkey who you might think of as like torture in a basement. Mother finds comfort, or at least security, in the cloth mother. This was mind blowing because there wasn't a deep awareness in the Western world at this time, though there was in many other places, in many other cultures, many other traditions, from the scientific Western point of view. First evidence is something not so instrumental, food, something a little bit more subtle, softer, warmer, literally, was what was more motivating for young beings. Um, we're not going to try to take this idea of sensations we didn't think about before: touch, smell, and build on them for understanding how the development of consciousness, thinking, reasoning, etc. happens. Um, Specifically in the early environment. We don't have time for this whole video, but this is what's called the strange situation test. Here, what they're looking at is, if you imagine a parent as an environment themselves for the kid. My parent is here or my parent is not here. Shaping the context of how the kid thinks. What they did was, on the left is the mom in the black sweater, on the right is the stranger in the situation, in like the jeans and the black jeans here. And what they do is it's like interchange mix. Like the mom is in the middle playing with the kid, and then the stranger comes in, and then the stranger and the mom talk to each other, and then the mom leaves, and the stranger stays, the stranger walks away, and the mom comes back, and the mom leaves, and the stranger comes back, and then the mom comes back, and then the stranger leaves. So this whole like inner thing. Why? Because they want to observe what would happen to the kid after in this dangerous situation, similar to the scary monster with the monkey. What would the kid do when presented with the environment of the mother, the parent? And what they found was several different types of reaction. Reaction number one, which we call a secure reaction, is that the mother comes back into the room after the kid has been along with a stranger, and the kid says, "Mom, crying, help me." And the mom comes over and picks up the kid that's consoled. You're okay. The mom puts the kid down and the kid continues to restore. In other words, the stranger sort of interrupted them. What they saw as possible for them. But not so much. That when the mom came back in, they weren't able to. We call this a secure reaction. We also have other sorts of possible reactions. These are somewhat confusing, but I'm going to call this one avoidance. And in this reaction, the kid cries, the mom comes back in, the kid keeps crying. The mom tries to move towards the kid to console him, and the kid moves away from the mom, literally avoided. The kid thinks in this case that the mom is not a reliable source of comfort. In comparison to the classroom, for the lucky, if you go to the classroom and say, hey, now, the kid has to live. But they can't do that with their mom. The other one that I'm actually going to call anxious, but it gets called insecure depending on where you're looking, is a bit different. The mom comes back in, and the kid is crying and gets consoled by the mom. Okay, mom comes up, says, I can help you. The kid says, yes, mom, please come help me. And then mom tries to put the kid back down to play toys again. The kid won't let him. The kid grabs onto it, continues to scream. Won't consoled. In this case, the kid has learned that the outside world is a dangerous place. That the environment of the parents there's another that is called disorganized sensory conflict. So the kid does not know whether to avoid the mom or whether to cling to the mom. This data has held up for the last 50 or 60 years. Every time the broad population gets surveyed, about 55% of the adult American population identifies and shows characteristics and behaviors of a secure, what we call attachment style. About 55%. About 20% of folks fall into this avoidance category, and 20% fall into your category, and about 5% of folks fall into this. There are adult type attachment patterns that come out in our relationships in this way. You may be in a relationship with yourself and recognize your partner with yourself. That's what you do. You go explore. You're going to go away. Is it not that? Is it not that me? Is it me? You were anxious. Where did you go? What did you do? Who were you talking to? Why did you talk to them? You avoided. What did you do? Okay. You're still mixed. To give you a sense of how this happens, again, thinking about the environment of what it lives, I like to think of it as a playground scenario. If you imagine a mom or a dad with their child at the playground, the kid does something like goes down the slide. There are several different sorts of interactions that take place after the kid goes down the slide. One type, which was before we referred to as a secure interaction, would look like the kid going down the slide. Mommy, Dad, I went down the slide. Wow, yay! And Mommy, Daddy says, oh my goodness, you went down the slide. Great job. How wonderful. Hug, whatever, high five, fist bump, who cares? Acknowledgement of that kid's experience. And then we'll go ahead and send back out. There's another sort of interaction like that. What typically is the helicopter problem. It is about to go down the slide. It's like, no, I don't go down the slide. It's dangerous. Be careful. You're going to hurt yourself. It goes down the slide. It gets to the bottom of the slide. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? This is what we call anxious slide. There's another type. Unfortunately, I would argue I'm gonna go down the slide, mom and daddy. Mom and daddy doesn't go this way. Down the slide. I went down the slide, mommy, daddy. Mommy, daddy. Yeah, they got that's where excitement comes because that's boring. Like, put it down. My guy's perspective. But it speaks to these patterns, speak to what's going on in what we call the attachment system of the kid. This is at the personal level, right? This is at the psychological level. We have some idea as to the biology going on here, but we don't have time to really get all of it. So we're going to keep it at the psychological level of the person. We're talking about attachment style today, and it's referred to as this sort of circle of security, right? Where you have either a secure or insecure base in the presence of the parent, the environment of the parent. And the kid goes out to explore the world because they have to explore. There are exciting things. That's part of growing up to go engage with them. Do they play? Do they run? Do they scream? And then something happens. They fall down. Another kid, an ant crawls across their foot. The sun is too hot, they get hungry, whatever it is, some crisis emerges and they come back into the parent. The parent's role as an environment for their kid is to be receptive to that coming in and accepting of that going out. And if they can play with that rhythm, the kid learns that the world is the safest that they can rely on. And if they don't play with that rhythm, the kid learns something. Okay, so now just briefly, with only a few minutes or so left, um, and we're going to talk about how cognition changes over the course of childhood. This is probably my favorite area of study. Um, One example here is called over memorizing or overstanding certain vocabulary pieces, and they give us a sense of how cognition grows or develops in a kid. First, we learn something is useful. For example, there's a dog, I call it dog, and everybody gets excited. For my niece, that was playing. Every time she would sit in a stroller, and then they live in Houston near the airport. So every time she'd see them go across the sky, she'd point up to the sky and say, plane! And everybody would get really excited. Yeah, it's a plane! She learns that's useful. It's useful not just to say what something is in the world, it's also useful to say it out loud because everybody will be really excited for you. That is useful. But then she sees other things that look like that. For her, in her world, in the suburbs of Houston, unfortunately, planes are far more common than birds. But when she would see a bird go across the sky, she would point at it and say, plane! And everybody would be like, no, that's not. Acknowledgement, laughter, get rewarded. Okay, they get that attention. But they're not so excited as they were before. They're like, yeah, that's a plane. No, that's a birdie. Okay, let me listen to that. So when I call a cat doggy, people are going to respond. I get feedback from the outside world that says this is not correct. I might see another four-legged thing and try again, doggy. I might see another four-legged thing and try again, doggy. And I learned over the course of time that all of those things that I thought were useful to doggies, four-legged, are not actually what makes a doggy doggy. Or at least not the like that makes a doggy a doggy. So I I start with this like tip of the spear thing into the world. Like that. And it works. I'm now, because I have a hammer, I see everything in the world as nail, and I'm going to try to bang on each of those nails with my hammer. Which do I do? I learn that's actually not a nail. I need something besides this hammer. This is the development process. This is happening even now in this room. You're sitting there thinking, is this what I need to do? This is what I did last time. How about I try this? Is this what I need? We start with some over-generalized idea of what's going to be useful, and over time, we prune, literally, we prune it back. We have this neurogenesis moment of, I'm going to try to make a transfer here to be everything. And then we're like, nope, that doesn't work. Prune it back. It's only for this thing. So there is this growth, and then like expansion, and then specification. Expansion and specification. And you can watch this overextension is what we call it. Here's another example of this. This comes from Piaget. In fact, I think I might have done a short video. Yeah. Okay, we have time for a short video. Short.
So first we're going to look at these two cups right here. Do you think there's the same amount of juice in this glass as there is in that glass? There you go. Okay. So we're going to take the juice from this glass and pour it into this one right here. Now we're going to look at this glass and that one. So there's more juice in this glass than in this glass, or do you think they have the same amount? Same amount. Doesn't mean it has the same amount of juice in it, but this one is just wider and this one's skinnier, but they had the same amount of juice in it.
Okay, seems silly and kind of simple to you because you know you're smart and intelligent and you do math. But if that girl was in, well, that is what she said, and listen to her words. She's so brilliant. She is able to separate just because this glass is smaller or skinnier, it doesn't mean there's more juice in it. Just because this glass of juice looks like the juice is higher, that's not the property for moreness. The property for moreness is the volume. I'm going to change the shape of that, but I watched you. You just call this the conservation principle. That like things will not change if they haven't changed. Just because they're unhealthy. And this actually takes time for kids to learn. They start out thinking the environment is everything. This one's bigger because the container that it's in is bigger. But the rule I'm going to live by, it takes more precision to identify that the container is actually separate from the amount of liquid that's in it. Again, this is the process of learning. How I said that to that person was separate from what I was actually saying. Or what the communication. How I said that was separate than what I actually could know or understand. I'm not dumb. I didn't know. That takes an incredible mental to identify something in the world with diversion before it's we're at time what's crazy is they talked about this process of learning based on the senses. This is that first stage that he split out off into like 5 stages actually, depending on how much change is happening. Here is this stage of like, everything is a doggy, sort of. This is the stage of being able to separate those things more specifically and say, I'm going to do this operation that category thing. And the formal operational stage is being able to combine, compare and contrast, display, to innovate on what was up. So you get the level of discovery that if you divide the pounds by the price, you can identify the value per pound of the. There's some crazy data on this that shows that something like 60 to 65% of U.S. adults, educated people, okay, people that have gotten back with bachelor's degrees, never actually reached formal interchange rules. You stop somebody at the front door, they wouldn't be able to solve certain problems that require them to respond. In other words, just do that. One more just example of the development of reasoning in what we call false belief task, which again sort of chipped away this idea that we're individuals, that much of our world is socially constructed and existent. In this task, I show 3-year-olds these series of cartoons. First one was paint. Sally has a black box and a white box. Second paint. Sally has a marble. She puts her marble into the box. Sally goes for a walk and takes the marble out of Sally's box and puts it in her box. Now the white box. Last one. Sally comes back and wants to play with the marble. Where will Sally look? You know, because you're smart, you're intelligent, you develop these skills, I'm going to say, well, Sally's going to look in her box. That's where she left it. A 3-year-old is going to say, in Anne's box. In other words, a 3-year-old is not able to diverge, to differentiate between their individual egocentric perspective and that of another. Over time, in particular, kids develop this ability to something else and what really could be the full to figure out this social role. But it doesn't come back. We only have a minute left. I'm going to take on video for the last 60 seconds. Got enough nods. You all have to nod. It's not going to be all 6 minutes. Oh. This is a series of experiments they did in Germany. Essentially, like not telling anything to the kid, but doing things in front of them. And waiting for the kid to do it. And at young ages, again, 2, 3, 4. Before, when asked, where's Anne going to look, the kid couldn't respond correctly and separate perspective. But when forced with something in front of them, struggling to do something, particularly in one of the weeks, they were able to say, here's how I did this thing. All of this to say that, again, social modeling doesn't come packaged, but it's also not only linguistic or theoretical or in the mind. It builds up on top of sensory motor experiences. We have a wonderful